Cougars versus Cougars in the conference semis. It's a catfight, but is it also a real title game?
You are Locked On College Crossover, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome in, Cougar fans, and I can say that confidently in both directions for this crossover episode. I'm your host, Locked On Coogs for the University of Houston, Parker Ainsworth, and Jake Hatch representing the BYU Cougars. I gotta ask, do you think Cougar Tails made it over to Kansas City? Like, how do you replace that over there?
I think that some Cougar Tails may have made the trek, but you know, Parker, that they've got these different individual school food related items, like they're supposed to be like represent the schools. You would have thought BYU would have sent a Cougar Tail. What did they send? They send churros. They're calling them Cosmos churros, and I'm sitting over here like, hold on, you're known for donuts, not churros. What are we doing?
Churros, I guess if we're going to pick a school, frankly, I might pick Houston, but I also pick like Arizona State. That's a weird one. I spent plenty of time in Salt Lake City and the surrounding area. I wouldn't have ever, I guess Provo's not quite the same. It's in the region is what I really mean. I wouldn't have picked a churro is what I'm getting at.
You and me both, because here's the thing. Like, we have a couple local churro places. There's one called Churrology. It's a good friend of mine who has a churro truck that he does a lot of stuff with. Shout out to Preston and what he does with that. But yeah, you're right. Like, Utah is not necessarily known for its churro scene. But hey, alas, here we are getting ready for you mentioned Coogs versus the Cougs. And it should be a fun one. I'm looking forward to it.
It should be a fun one. Frankly, while I enjoyed Houston winning their semifinal game, I want to ask you about BYU and Iowa State, because I also thought that was a really fun game. Yeah. I think it's two of the best couple teams in the conference. Obviously, I think of Houston very highly, but I think of both those teams being very good. And I want to ask, I guess, if I'd asked you after these Houston and BYU played 2 months ago, that you'd be, tooth and nail with Iowa State and be the team wearing the white jerseys, the higher ranked team, et cetera, would you have thought that it would have ended it like that? I mean, like, to be here, I think, is a long stretch from where you were.
Well, you're right, because here's the thing. BYU started this Big 12 season, Parker, 1-3, 2-6, and then at one point they were 6-6. Since they got to 6-6, all they've done is win. They were on a 9-game win streak, the longest streak in the conference, only outdone by the Houston Cougars, who have won 11 straight. So this is two teams coming to meet, and they obviously met way back in early January, so it's been a minute since the Cougars have seen the other Cougars, and I'm interested to see how BYU matches up this time, because Iowa State's a very physical team, and BYU saw them twice in about a 2-week span and passed with flying colors with 2 victories, obviously, out of those matchups, but really the only team that I think what I would term punked BYU in Big 12 play was the Houston Cougars. BYU was really never in that game. They got out physical. They got out hustled by the Cougars down there at the Fertitta Center. So the biggest thing I'm taking away from Iowa State, Parker, is that this is a BYU team that's learned how to play much more a physical brand of basketball. It may not be the same level of physicality that Houston plays with, but they have played a much better style of basketball ever since they faced off against Houston 2 months ago.
Well, and that gets me to a bunch of other questions, right? Because you mentioned that they've grown as a physical team, but they also hit 18 threes, right? Am I reading that right? I mean, that's a lot of 3-pointers for a physical team. Maybe I'm a little more old school, but I think of those as being kind of opposite ends of the spectrum. So how are we doing both there?
That makes a very good point. They were 18 of 36 from 3 against Iowa State, and they don't win that game without all 18 of those 3-pointers.
They won by 4.
You needed every one of them, and you make a very good point. It's usually when you're a high volume 3-point shooting team, you're considered to be finesse. But if you watch that Iowa State game in particular, Keba Keita and Fousseyni Traore, Mihailo Boskovic, the big men for BYU on the interior, they were rebounding machines. And that's where the physicality comes into this. That's why I'm bringing more of the physicality side of this, is the BYU, that was the total rebounds here for BYU. I have to pull this up. It was 31-28. It's actually not as big of a disparity as I thought. But this is a team, speaking of BYU, that has gotten a lot more physical on the boards of late. And just they're willing to go toe-to-toe with teams more so than they were maybe before they really kind of got into gear halfway through the Big 12 slate. So I get that there's a bit of a misnomer there when you say, hey, they made 18 3-pointers, and how can they be a physical team? But I think you have to look at it in context, understanding that their identity is they're going to hoist up a lot of threes. They play a high volume shooting type squad. They either are shooting at the rim or they're shooting beyond the arc. They're very much an NBA-esque type offense here, Parker. And that's the difference, is that, yes, it may look finesse, but they're playing a much more physical brand alongside that.
Well, and I know I'm dominating the questions here, and I promise to let the tables turn a second, but the NBA-esque thing and Kevin Young, that all makes me question, like, is a big part of this as someone who first of all, you clearly watch them a lot because you pronounce their names much better than I ever will, and whatever, right? But is this just like they have finally played 30 games under Kevin Young and they're like kind of they understand each other a little bit better now than they did 10, 13 games into the season?
Absolutely. The biggest thing is you had a new head coach who's he's coming down from the NBA level. He hadn't coached in college, and it was like 15 or 16 years when he took over the job at BYU. He's been in the NBA or the G League all that time, Parker, and there's different levels of play. The G League has its own level, the NBA has its own level, and college has its own level, and he had to figure out, okay, what can I take from my NBA experience and how do I translate it over to get it to work in the college game? Because he's talked about the fact, speaking of Kevin Young, that the physicality that's allowed in the Big 12, it doesn't exist in the NBA. He said that multiple guys would foul out of every game if it were called like the NBA was, but he is adapted to that in terms of his coaching style, and the players understand, okay, this is how we go about things, and you're right. They finally clicked. He talked about the UCF game in particular when they played out in Orlando. He pointed at that. There's the halftime chat there. He felt like changed things around. I think it was the West Virginia win when they won in Morgantown more so than anything else, because that's the kickoff of this 9-game win streak. They seemed to finally get in sync, understand what it was going to take to win games in this league, and they simply put, they haven't lost since.
Well, they hadn't lost since. Both these teams feel hot in that way. I feel like BYU's had some flair to it. They've played well against good teams. It's always nice. I guess people look at the Utah score and say that was too close, but there's also a rivalry element of that one that will always make that one a little bit weird. You mentioned West Virginia. Was that the moment you said, okay, this team has a chance to win the conference, or was there some other point along the way where you're like, oh, I think we got a shot here?
When they beat the Kansas and Arizona week, so they absolutely just demolished Kansas in Provo, and then they went to Arizona and won in the McHale Center. That's the week that told me, hey, this team's got the goods. The West Virginia game, I reference it because you probably have noticed this, and your listeners have probably noticed this. BYU plays 10, 11 guys in the rotation. The West Virginia game was when that came into fruition. Mihailo Boskovic and Trey Stewart, two guys who you will see on the court in this matchup, they came into that game. They've been glued to the bench for months at that point. BYU was searching for anything in that game. Kevin Young says, you know what, let's just try something different, tosses them in the game, and they provided a spark that got BYU to that win and kicked off this win streak. But what told me everything I need to know about this team being a contender in the Big 12 was the week they faced Kansas and Arizona and swept that, because you beat those two teams back to back. That means that kind of showed me they meant business.
And I'm still in shock at how well you pronounce Mihailo Boskovic. I'm still like, why can't we also like Dallin Hall is really, really easy. All right, so I don't mean to poke fun at names. I'm just admitting that I'm going to have trouble with them, I guess. Richie Saunders, I don't want to go too far without mentioning, like, that dude has grown into something different than he's certainly different than he was when these two teams played. Because even when we previewed that game together when they played the first time around, I don't remember you saying he was going to be thinking like this, and he wasn't in the Houston game, but he certainly has been in these last 9. Was there a Richie Saunders moment, or is it just kind of a slow growth kind of deal with Kevin Young?
I think it's similar. We talked about with Kevin Young, just kind of getting adapted and understanding the system. The way that BYU plays fits Richie's skill set to a T. This is a guy who started his career as kind of a glue guy, became that 6th man last year under Mark Pope, and then this year, the start of the season, I saw some offensive prowess from him that I said, okay, maybe he's got an opportunity to maybe contribute 10 to 15 points a game. Never did I think, Parker, that he's ever going to go for 30 plus in certain games and become the most improved player in the Big 12 conference. But as the season progressed, that Houston game, he struggled mightily in it. And it was one of those games, maybe one of the quietest games he had all year. But from that point on, he got better and better and better. And I think that the game that Richie really broke out, and it may have been that Arizona game when he hit 2 clutch free throws late in that game to win it for BYU down there in Tucson. That's screamed, okay, Richie knows that he's that proverbial that dude, that guy. And he is playing with an air of confidence that he absolutely knows he belongs, and he feels like he absolutely can compete at this level. And the nice part is he will carry that confidence into this rematch against Houston and hope that he has a much better performance against the Cougars.
Well, and we're going to get to that performance in this game between the pairs of Cougars, I guess, because I really do feel like these two are heading towards what's going to feel like a title bout between two heavyweights, both coming in on big win streaks, and both really kind of feel like they can win the conference for a little bit different reasons. But before we get too far, today's show is brought to you by Nissan. If you haven't noticed, we are all about the stats because numbers don't lie. When it comes to the all-new Nissan Armada Pro 4X, the numbers are on an MVP level. With the ability to tow up to 8,500 pounds, that's a lot of pounds. It can quite literally carry the whole team, plus the gear, wherever you need. It's powered by a twin-turbo V6 engine, delivering the strength and performance to handle highways, back roads, and everything in between. And with room for up to 8 people, the Armada Pro 4X is built for big crews, big adventures, and even bigger memories. Whether exploring off-road trails or rolling up to the arena, the Armada Pro 4X brings power, versatility, and style wherever you go. Take your adventures to new heights with the all-new Nissan Armada Pro 4X. Learn more at nissanusa.com. Today's show is also brought to you by FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, and March Madness is here. That's why we're sitting here talking hoops. And FanDuel is giving you the chance to get on the action like never before. Right now, a new customer get $200 back in bonus bets. When your first $5 bet hits, the $200 back in bonus bets on everything from buzzer beaters, cinema stories, etc. Even bet on who's coming in the nets. You got a feeling that one of these two Cougars are going to be. I kind of like, I'm not going to put you on the spot here, Jake, but I kind of like that the app is very easy and the payouts are instant because I like to feel the instant gratification personally.
We all they pay it out fast. The best part is you mentioned the app's super easy to use, and the best part is you don't have to bet before the game and then sit there and wait on it. You can do the live betting feature as well. You think that, okay, maybe BYU or Houston in this game could have a run in them in the second half. You can even bet on that. So the nice part is they've got every option available to you.
Or maybe a player sprains his ankle and you change what you're thinking about that. We'll talk about that in a second as well. But visit FanDuel.com, get on the college hoops action all tournament long. That's FanDuel.com. Jake Parker here talking Cougar basketball. That's blanket statement here. Yep. All right, Jake. I mentioned, I don't know if in January you thought I'd be here heading to the semifinals. What do the Cougars feel about the semifinals? How are they feeling? What kind of questions they got going? What's swirling through a BYU Cougars mind these days?
Well, okay, so you mentioned just barely when we were talking about our friends at FanDuel, there may have been an ankle injury that could be a differentiator in this game. Juwan Roberts. Now, he didn't do what Cooper Flagg did because Cooper Flagg was taken off in a wheelchair in the ACC tournament, and that's a concern there. But Juwan Roberts, he's kind of the engine that makes the interior of this Houston Cougars team go. What's the latest? What should Cougar, speaking of BYU, what should BYU Cougar fans expect from him potentially? Is he going to play?
Well, I believe he's going to give it a go to play, which is funny because I think a lot of my fans, commenters, and maybe even myself might be saying not to, right? But that's just not who the guy is. And Kelvin Sampson has always said that they're going to roll a ball out to play. We're going to compete to win with whoever's out there healthy for us enough to play. And we were talking about on Locked On Cougs leading up to this, is it worth playing in the conference tournament? Because they did win the conference fairly convincingly in the regular season. People were talking about them like they already had the 1 seed locked up. What could happen. And Sampson is very blunt about you can't turn culture on and off. If we're going to compete to win, we're going to compete to win. If we don't want to have a tournament, that's a whole different conversation. But if we're going to play a tournament, then we're going to play to win it, right? And Juwan Roberts did sprain his ankle. He stepped on someone's foot driving to the basket. He fell down near the Houston bench. And I say that because he then stayed on the ground because the trainer could get to him and work with him. I kind of think he could have gotten up and walked over to the bench if he hadn't fallen down right there. He did walk to the back. They did x-rays. X-rays were negative. He walked back to the bench. They said they retaped it and stuff like that somewhere in between. Houston won by 10 points. He did not go back in the game. Post-game, he says he's going to give it a go to try to play tomorrow. He's a tough guy. Last year, he was playing the last month of the season, getting his knee drained every 3 days. He had soft cast on one hand. He's a warrior in that sense. So if anything, this might be the least, but even with this ankle sprain, it might be the least banged up he's been in a long time. So I think he's going to try and give go, even if I might advise him not to. What's funny is I kind of wonder if he's also about to have to cover Saunders on a bum ankle and what that really, really means.
Yeah.
But anyway, to answer your question in the longest way possible, I think he's going to go.
Okay, so the other thing about this is when BYU went to the Fertitta Center, they had one of their poorest three-point shooting outings. It was 8-24, so it's 33%. But Houston, conversely, they made 16-34 three-pointers in that game. And I was a shooting performance for the ages from the Houston Cougars, it felt like in many respects. And they just absolutely dominated every facet of that game. Has their shooting kept up this season? We talk all the time about how physical Houston plays. On my radio show here in Salt Lake City, we had a guy on who talked about the physical nature of Houston, and he's just astounded by how physical Houston plays. But my question is, has the shooting kept up this season? Has that been the big differentiator of this Houston team as compared to other Houston squads?
I'm cheating a little bit, and then I have the box scores pulled up here. It looks like Houston shot 48% from three the first time these two teams played. They haven't shot that well all season long. That's ridiculous. They do have three guys in the backcourt. The starting backcourt's all shooting over 40%. As a team, they're shooting just under. It's 39.8%. That's third best in the country. They are good at shooting 3-point shots. I don't mean to say like that they're not, but they have not shot 48% all year long. I guess that would be absurd. I think first is like 41. That'd be crazy.
Now, the other side of that is, so Travis Hansen, he's a BYU legend. He's the individual I was referring to, and he talked about how physical Houston plays. And he said that you talk about the culture that Kelvin Sampson, you can't turn culture on and off. The culture of Houston basketball under Kelvin Sampson is it's an ultra physical, rugged affair when you go up against the Houston Cougars. BYU endured a really rugged affair against Iowa State, and I've got concerns that BYU's legs just may not be there because this is tournament action. You're playing multiple games and multiple days in a row. It's tough to keep up the level and the pace that BYU likes to play at for multiple days in a row. So give me a sense. Is Houston going to try and bring that ultra physical nature to this game? Are they going to make that kind of the calling card here, even if Juwan Roberts is playing or not?
Yeah, I imagine that's the only window to play, right? You can't turn it on and off. It's funny, in looking at the box scores and trying to remind myself about this game, getting ready for Friday, I was reminded that JoJo Tugler, who ended up being Conference Defensive Player of the Year, fouled out, played like 18, 19 minutes, something like that. Like, it's, interesting about how much more physical it could have gotten. That's JoJo Tugler, the 6'7" guy with the 7'6" wingspan, which always drives people that don't follow him very closely kind of crazy. As far as physicality goes, I think we saw Houston about this time a year ago in the conference tournament play very physical in the same kind of situation in the quarterfinal, the semifinal, and run out of steam in their own right against Iowa State in the championship game. So I say to say that I don't think there has any way to turn it off. They might run a deeper rotation out there, but they're not turning it off with whoever's out there.
Now, the other thing is, you mentioned in the open of today's show, is this the pseudo championship game? Because we talked about the fact these two teams have combined to win 20 straight games. I know that you have on the other side of the bracket some really good teams, Texas Tech, who a lot of people I think it was a dark horse to maybe go to the Final Four, win a national championship, that type of stuff. They got they got the Toppin kid and all that stuff. But are you of the mindset that this game, whoever wins this, is going to win the Big 12 title?
I really think so. I think both teams are hot at the right time. I know Houston fans will tell me they're winning ugly or whatever, but they are winning. And I also think for what it's worth, y'all just beat Arizona, I guess about to say in the last couple of weeks. It technically was last month at this point, but Houston beat Arizona at their place. I also feel like you saw, Houston split with Texas Tech, but won on the road in Lubbock. I feel like y'all are a whole lot different team than when y'all saw Lubbock, saw Texas Tech, I guess I should say, because that was back of like we're talking about in the Houston game. I just feel like there's two of the teams playing the best ball right now. I probably would have included Iowa State, frankly. And so that makes me feel like it's the winner of this game. It will be a good championship game. It's four good basketball teams. I just feel like, honestly, and then I guess we both beat Kansas. I shouldn't. I guess as we're recording this, not quite out of this whole thing yet, but we did both beat Kansas, and y'all beat them quite impressively. And so I guess I said it to say that I would imagine whoever wins this is favored in the championship game, right?
You'd think so, and that's the interesting part about this is I'll give you a little insight on this, Parker. You probably have no idea on this. Can you guess the last time BYU won a conference tournament title by chance?
No, but I feel like there's going to be independent year to throw that off.
Well, it wasn't even the West Coast Conference era when they were independent in football. It goes all the way back to 2001. It's been 24 years since BYU has won a conference tournament title. That was in the Mountain West era for BYU, and that was like year 3 of the Mountain West Conference. So that it's been a minute since BYU's been able to go out and win a conference tournament title. I'm sure Cougar fans will love nothing more, speaking of BYU fans, that watch their team win a conference tournament title. I guess I should include Houston saying that as well. I'm just interested to see if BYU, the pace that they like to play at, that they favor in terms of really racing up and down the court, if it could really hold up over 3 games against the type of competition they've played. Iowa State, Houston, and then potentially at Texas Tech, etc. It's a pretty rugged affair to run this gauntlet in the Big 12.
It is, and you're getting me to the inevitable question that I feel like I'm asking everyone these days about conference tournaments and all that. But before we get to all that, we told you how to win some money over at FanDuel. We got to tell you how to take care of it as well. And that's with the buddies over at Monarch Money. If you ever check your bank account and you wonder like where'd all the money go, between dining out, online shopping, entertainment, tickets to basketball games, it's very easy to lose track. And that's where Monarch Money helps you out by being your personal CFO, giving you full visibility to control your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So you just stop managing money. You can start building wealth with this app. I like that it's very easy to work with. You get a little like online partner through Monarch. You can track all your shared personal account stuff with your own partner and stuff like that, all on the same page, all the accounts in one spot, all very easy to navigate and see. If you can't tell, that's a big thing for me in apps. I need it to be easy to navigate. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Yeah, you too. It's a Cougar thing. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. You heard that correctly. monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONCollege for half off of your first year. Park Ranger, Jake Hatch, Locked On Cougs and Cougars. Cougar fans alike are watching these teams play out as they get hot towards March. And not just because of Jawan Roberts' ankle, but across the board, I think everyone's just like, hey, hold your breath. Let's stay healthy. Let's just get to the big dance. Let's make a run here, right? Peek behind the kimono for folks at home. It came up in the Big 12 text chain today for Locked On hosts. And there are some opinions out there, to say the least, about whether or not they should even have these conference tournaments, whether or not they should play in them. I didn't mean to go back and forth with one of our colleagues there for a second, but Jake, I noticed you were silent, and so I want to ask, what are your thoughts about this conference tournament as someone who also just got to the Power 4 level like Houston did?
Now, let me clarify. I meant to weigh in on this debate, so
you weren't ducking smoke, is what you're saying.
I was busy with other work responsibilities when it was going on. I went back and read it, and I'm like, wow, we do have some interesting philosophies on this. Now, let me preface this by saying I love watching teams who want to play high-level basketball, and that's what I feel like Houston and BYU bring to the table. But on the flip side of it, when you watch a Cooper Flagg go down with an injury, when you watch Jawan Roberts go down with an ankle injury, that tells you everything you need to know about teams like a Houston, like a Duke, in this case, BYU, who are firmly inside the NCAA tournament field. Really, the conference tournament is about staying healthy. Keep your guys as close to 100% health as possible. And in some respects, with certain teams, I think Iowa State, for example, and I don't want to rub salt in the wound of Iowa State fans, but here's the deal. Be happy in some ways that you lost that game, because it's going to allow you to get a couple of guys hopefully a little healthier with a few extra days off ahead of the NCAA tournament starting. I've got concern, once again, that BYU's legs simply may just give out on them if they do make a run here beyond this semifinal. And that's the issue is, could you run out of gas and be completely half tank by the time you get to the NCAA tournament next week and find yourself in a slugfest in the first or second round when easily you could be playing at a higher level than you are playing? So I guess that's a long way of saying I see why we want to see teams win these conference tournament titles, but if it's going to allow a team to get in the tournament, chase it with all your might. If you're already firmly inside the projected field, I'd take it a little bit easy personally.
Yeah, and that's kind of think somewhere close to where I'm at, opposed to, I'm not going to name the colleague because I didn't tell him I was going to talk about him on this. That feels awkward. But my deal is, if we're going to play basketball, let's really play. I'm not saying to sit your guys. And one other person I listen to is talking about like playing managers and whatever. Like that's fine, right? That's not quite where I'm at on it.
Yeah.
I though in texting through it today was like, I think I'd almost rather play if you said, hey, we're gonna play another week of regular season games instead. Like I think I might sign up for 22 regular season games and no conference tournament instead of 18 with a conference tournament. And I like, you play, half the conference twice, you play the other half just one, and alternate who fits where in that or whatever. 22 conference games with no conference tournament to me feels way more authentic to like playing 2 games in 3 days and getting ready for March Madness than anything else.
Well, I know this won't fly at any level. So this is like all hypothetical stuff. But think about this. Let's say, so we currently, speaking of the Big 12, have 8 teams projected to be in the field. Maybe a 9th could sneak in. That's going off the Lunardi bracketology last I checked. So half of the conference, maybe one more, is going to get in the field. So Parker, to your point, maybe you, as the season progresses, you look at how things are shaping up, and maybe you cut it off. If you're a top 40 Ken Palm team, if you want to use that rating, or you look at Torvik, any of those rating systems that seem to be indicators of teams that can make the tournament. Okay, those teams that look like they're going to make it, as you mentioned, maybe you line them up and have them play essentially regular season matchups, and you take the rest of the teams, whether it's an 8, a 10 team field, and have them compete in a conference tournament system with the automatic qualification coming out of that squad to get you maybe an extra team or 2 into the tournament. What do you think about that?
Some sort of a hybrid model would be interesting. I would like to have to like really think about logistics because I'm feeling put on the spot now. I hadn't thought about a hybrid model between a half the conference and half the conference not. But.
And here's the thing, it would be so difficult to manage all that because you're trying to track it as it's in the lead up to the weeks leading up to that, and you're trying to schedule games on the fly. Like I said, this is hypothetical pie in the sky type stuff that I'm talking about, but it's worth looking at, I think, in terms of what you're talking about. In that text chain, it was pointed out they're going to drop back to an 18-game conference schedule next year for the Big 12. So maybe, to your point, Parker, you keep it to 20 games and you just push into that championship week and keep playing regular season games.
Regular season games feel like they should matter a lot to me. And I also speak as a Houston guy, right? But Houston was in the American Athletic Conference before this. And there were years where Houston, and the Kelvin Sampson era, there were years, it wasn't so much before that, but where they did very well in the regular season in the American Athletic Conference, did not win the tournament, and then were like crossing their fingers they got that bid. And it's
you're preaching to the choir to BYU fans. They had to deal with Gonzaga and St. Mary's in the West Coast Conference. There was never a chance that there was going to be 3 bids coming out of the West Coast Conference. It wasn't going to happen. They were not going to allow that to happen. BYU could have an incredible regular season, lose to St. Mary's in the semifinals of the West Coast Conference, and say, bleep, we're going to the NIT. So preaching to the choir here.
Well, and it's interesting because like if you're in a potential 1-bid conference, the regular season's so much harder to win. It feels like it needs to be rewarded in a way that would, negate like someone getting hot for 2 days at the conference tournament, or a guy turning an ankle for 1 game and he might be back the next day, but he missed that semifinal game in the insert G5. I don't want to offend anyone kind of tournament. I don't know. It's an interesting series of thoughts that like, it feels like it's unfolded a lot for our teams, and somewhat ironically, I'm not going to mention a lot of the people that have opinions of this are no longer playing. Like our team's the one still in this, and we're like, I don't know if we should even be playing this thing.
About this is everybody is entitled to their opinion. I wholeheartedly endorse that. Like I encourage anybody watching this podcast, whether you're a Coug or a Cougar or whatever side you're on, let us know what you think. Do you want a hybrid model like we maybe proposed here, or do you want to play more regular season matchups? What feedback is what we thrive on here. But to your point, it is kind of funny that certain people that their seasons are over are saying, yeah, keep playing hard. It's like, yeah, you're saying that because guess what? Your guys aren't at risk and you're not going to be playing in the big dance.
It's really easy to say that from the couch, to say at the very least. Jake, you mentioned radio work. You're covering like all sports in Utah, which is like kind of turned into a sports place all of a sudden, which is crazy. What's going on lately? What you got going?
We got the hockey club, Utah Hockey Club, the new NHL team here. They're in the thick of the playoff race, and with the Utah Jazz firmly in tank mode. They just got fined by the NBA. That was fun. But we've got one playoff race with a new franchise. There's a lot of excitement around that. And then obviously we're watching BYU do their thing. Utah State is also probably going to the NCAA tournament. And then Keep an eye on my UVU Wolverines. I'm a proud graduate. I have 2 degrees. I got one from UVU and one from BYU. My UVU Wolverines have to win the WAC. You talk about a one-bid league. They got to get through WAC Vegas if they want to live their dreams for the first time ever in the NCAA tournament. I will be wearing green and gold rooting on my UVU Wolverines this weekend.
If you didn't go to BYU, WAC Vegas might mean a whole different thing.
Here's the thing. They use that term, and they use it very loosely across the entire spectrum.
Yeah, on that note, maybe your Utah Jazz will tank and get a Houston Cougar, and we can have more conversation like this. Jake, always a pleasure. Thanks for stopping by to cross it over. For what I hope is a fun basketball game, 6 o'clock Central or 6:30 Central Time, and I guess that means it's 5:30 next time zone over. So make sure you tune into ESPN2 for that one. Locked on Cougs, Locked on Cougars. Thank you for making us your first listen each and every day. Locked on Podcast Network. That means your team every day. And I can say this on both ends now. Go Cougs.